Shout out to my subscribers who sent me this story. A few of you sent me this story right here. Now it's interesting because I just did a video talking about fentanyl and opioids pretty much ravishing through the state of New Jersey. Now we go a little bit south of Jersey and we're ending up in Delaware, where you had this story that came out saying Delaware investigators seize enough fentanyl to kill 3/4 of state's population. That's a lot of people. Because you got to think, Delaware is a very small state. I think Delaware is probably one of the smallest states in the establishment. Like when I'm traveling, like going north, like if I'm going to Jersey or New York, like to visit family or for whatever reason, it doesn't take me long to get out of Delaware. Like driving through Delaware is like driving through a town, depending on what direction that you're headed. But in the picture, you can see this man. His name is Luis Rentiera, and he was the ringleader of this, I guess you can say, this organization that was being operated. Now, of course, he wasn't acting alone. He was just the head of it. I know many of you probably saying, thank God it's not a black person. You want to know, and I know y'all probably are thinking that because every time it seems to come out that there is some kind of drug bust that happens, it's usually a black face behind it. And they'll throw out this very wild number. Like every time I do a video talking about a drug distribution and it has something to do with fentanyl and opioids and a black face is behind it, they always say this was enough fentanyl and opioids to wipe out millions. I remember it was one I did about New York. They said this thing could have wiped out half of New York. I said, stop lying. New York is a very big state. Wipe out half of what? New York as a state has dealt and gone through so much, including drugs, and I'm sure opioids is one of them, and they ain't wiped out that many people yet. Not saying it hasn't, but New York's population is still a very growing one. So they reach with that one, but I know why they do that. But let me just go ahead and get into it. On Monday, Delaware State Police and the FBI announced more than 24 arrests in connection with a crackdown on a major organization operating in the state. The 28 defendants are now charged with 252 felonies, including criminal racketeering, conspiracy, drug dealing, and more. Law enforcement official says the organization was run by Luis Rentiera, who had properties in Delaware and Philadelphia. Officers executed 31 search warrants during their investigation, which began back in February 2018. They recovered at least $5 million worth of heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. Included in these results was the largest fentanyl seizure by Delaware law enforcement in the state's history, making a major dent in the supply of fentanyl that would have been distributed on the streets of Newark and surrounding areas, said Jennifer Boone, special agent in charge of the FBI's Baltimore field office. Alone, the quantity of fentanyl seized could have killed thousands and thousands of people. Authorities say they seized enough fentanyl to kill 3/4 of the state's population. It was enough fentanyl to kill 750,000 Delawareans, said Lieutenant Robert Jones of the Delaware State Police. Officials said that the Rentiera organization carried out a great deal of violence. Multiple weapons were also recovered. Rentiera faces up to 30 years in prison if convicted. The investigation is ongoing, but officials said Monday this effectively amounts to the dismantling of a major drug organization that terrorized the city of Wilmington. The amount of fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, drug money, and guns seized in this sting has saved lives and will save lives, point blank. All it's going to do is going to make them go to the next town over or wherever they can and get their hit that they can no longer get from here and get strung out over there, even if they got to cross state lines. Because Delaware to Baltimore, which is why that person that they mentioned is in Baltimore, is not a far drive. Like driving from Baltimore to the state of Delaware is like, depending on what side you're on, is maybe like a 30-minute to a 1-hour drive. It's that close to each other. And the reason why it was easier for him to operate out of Philadelphia is because Philadelphia to Delaware is not a long drive either. So I'm giving y'all some geographical backgrounds here for those of you who are not familiar with the surroundings of Delaware to Maryland and PA. The actions of these narcotics enterprises have ripples stretching across our region and at times across the nation. Disrupting them helps disrupt a drug trade and that I and everyone else here today can attest breeds violence in Delaware and elsewhere, said Delaware Attorney General Kathleen Jennings. Well, I can almost assume who the main supporters or the main people who was going to this man and to his operation to get their drugs, because Delaware is a vastly majority PC state, depending on what part of Delaware that you are in. So this doesn't in the least bit surprise me that this was going on. And it seems to me like they like they said, they were making millions of dollars. They've been operating since 2018, or that's how long they've been under investigation. And look at how much money they made in that time, like millions of dollars. That means business was booming, literally. And this guy didn't have a care in the world, apparently. This guy literally became a millionaire off of this. And this is what the pharmaceutical companies love. These are what those big pharma companies that I mentioned before, this is what they love. These are the people that they put out there. But if they really want to crack down on it, not that they really can, because they've been trying to sue them, they have to go after those big pharma companies. But see, those are billion-dollar organizations. The establishment needs them. That's a huge part of their money-making scheme, is those big pharma companies. You know, the private prisons, that's another one. And then there's some others as well, but those are the two that definitely come to mind when this establishment tries to stay afloat, despite all of the debt that it has accrued over the years. But y'all know I gotta say it, because it's the mantra. I feel absolutely nothing. But this is just now showing that now that fentanyl and opioids has expanded like a spider web. Because remember, at one point when I started talking about these videos, or doing these videos talking about fentanyl and opioids, it was only Ohio that I ever talked about. That's why I called Ohio the hub, because it was one of the first places I ever talked about when it came to opioids and fentanyl, heroin, and whatever other drug that can be under that umbrella. It was just mainly Ohio. Then it spread to me talking about it in West Virginia. Now it's being talked about in the two least places that I would ever expect, and that's New Jersey and Delaware. So that just shows that this thing can touch any place. It does not discriminate. But when it hits those rural areas, then you got to be worried, because like the woo-woo, there really isn't any place they can really go to get treatment, since they want to give them treatment and whatnot. See, if they're in a metropolitan area like a New York, or, you know, like a DC, you know, or a California, then they'll be good, because they have access to a lot of places that is willing to give them aid. But when you in them small rural areas, the pro is that people like this guy will have a lot of business. The con is the people who want to get treatment won't get it.